And Regent Lucas is over there.
Is right over there.
Audit Committee, Audit and Compliance Committee of the Board of Regents for February 7th will please come to order. And I know you all barely had time for a 7th-inning stretch, so I appreciate your coming back promptly, and here we go. And first of all, I'd like to make sure we introduce and acknowledge our two student representatives, Jael Karandi and Allie Euland. And why don't you just, for everybody, a quick saying who you are and what you do. Allie, go ahead.
Yeah, well, good morning, everyone. My name is Allie Euland. I am a senior at UMD, majoring in marketing and minoring in communication, and I'm vice chair of the student reps.
Okay, thank you. Ava?
Yeah, hello, everyone. I'm Jael Karandi. I'm a second year studying finance and marketing in the Carlson School, and I'm a student rep.
Okay, thank you both. Look forward to your comments. All right, the first item on our agenda is the external auditor's review of their audit work and some proposed audit approaches. And so Ms. Knudsen, Ms. Paulson, and Ms. Dockendorf. So welcome. And
good morning. Good morning, Chair Cohen. Pleased to be back here again. As a reminder, we were here in December to report on what I'll call phase one of our audit work, primarily the consolidated financial statements of the university. As we have done in previous years, when we come in early February, it's to report on the additional audit and audit-related work we do, primarily in the compliance area. So Judy's going to talk about that in a minute. The second thing we're going to that we want to engage in a conversation about is a potential change in how we approach our testing for our grant audits, and really having this conversation now, because as a reminder, we come and meet with you in May to share our audit plan for the 2019 audit. So really want to have a conversation in advance of that as we sort of complete that analysis and bring that back to you in May. So looking forward to that conversation. So I will turn it over to Judy Dockendorf.
Good morning, Chair Cohen, members of the committee. Excuse me, I'd point you to page 5 of your materials. So this is a summary starting about the Uniform Grant Guidance Audit. So this is the federal audit that we completed back in November. You actually received a copy of this in your December materials when we presented on the year-end audit as well. As a reminder, these federal audits are required for entities that receive more than $750,000 on an annual basis in federal awards. And as you can see on the bottom of this page, that the university receives just over $1 billion in federal awards. The next page, page 6, highlights for you those programs that we identified as major programs as part of this audit and subjected those to testing in 2018. The university continues to qualify as a low-risk auditee, What this does is sets the threshold for the dollar amount of the federal expenditures that must be tested. So as a low-risk auditee, there must be at least 20% of federal expenditures tested on an annual basis. And the table at the top there shows you that we're about just over $900 million in federal expenditures that were tested as part of our 2018 audits. Consistent with what we had communicated back in December, we issued unmodified opinions on each of the federal programs, and there were no compliance issues noted or control issues with any of that work. We'll come back to some of this as we talk about scoping for 2019 in a few minutes. On the bottom of page 6 highlights the state examination work that we do. So for students that receive state financial aid, we do procedures there. We issue 4 reports, 1 for each of the campuses, and those are included in your materials for this meeting. Those reports were issued in December, and there were no findings for any of the campuses. So what we do in this work is make a selection of students for each campus, and then look at various things: eligibility, the dollar amounts that they've received from a financial aid perspective, and ensure that that's in compliance with the requirements for the state grants. The next slide highlights for, or next page, excuse me, highlights for you the audit-related procedures. So we did 3 agreed-upon procedures engagements related to 2018 as well. The first was the Twin Cities NCAA agreed-upon procedures. This is something we've done on an annual basis for the university. And you can see here at the bottom of this page, there were no findings noted, and we issued those reports in January of 2019, copies of which are included in your materials. For these agreed upon procedures, the NCAA actually sets out procedures that all Division I, II, and III institutions that we have to follow for our procedures for those institutions. So it consists of making selections of revenue and expense transactions and agreeing them back to supporting documentation and ensuring that they're in accordance with the NCAA's guidelines. So no issues were noted for the Twin Cities work. On the next page, we highlight the work that we did for Duluth. So similar, follows the same NCAA guidelines. This was actually the first year we did the Duluth work. And we only had 1 finding noted where a coach was paid about just under $2,000 more than the amount that was outlined in the contract. This was identified by the university, and amounts were refunded to the university through a salary reduction in fiscal 19. But something that is noted in our report. And then the last agreed upon procedures that we had done for 2018 was around regenerative medicine. So there's some state requirements related to the university's partnership with the Mayo Clinic around funds and how those funds are utilized. This covers a 2-year period, so we're doing this every other year. And we issued our report in November, and there were no findings noted. So before we move on to discussion about 2019, I'd maybe stop and see if anyone has questions on those audit and audit-related services for 2018.
All right, are there any questions? Thank you. All right, if not, let's move on to what you're proposing for 2019.
Okay, so starting on page 9 of our materials, we'd provided some guidance around the uniform grant guidance audits that we do. This is replacing what we used to call A133 audit. These are the federal audits, as I mentioned, and there was new guidance issued back in 2013 that is now applicable for the university. It has been applicable for 3 years now, I think, 3 audits that we've done under the uniform grant guidance. As I mentioned, that guidance requires a certain threshold of expenditures to be tested, so 20% of expenditures need to be subject to audit on an annual basis. And then there's also some requirements around how you go through risk assessment. So what the uniform grant guidance really wanted auditors to focus on is where the risk is higher. Is the risk higher in these bigger dollar programs that are very well controlled, or is the risk higher in some of these smaller dollar value programs where maybe they're outside of the sponsored financial reporting group, they're one-off items that a group is getting funding for every couple of years, smaller dollars may not be as well controlled. So the Uniform Grant Guidance really focuses to do a risk assessment and focus on where is that risk higher, and let's make sure we're focusing there as opposed to some of the lower risk items. So I would actually maybe move you then to slide 11. And this highlights some proposed scoping for 2019 and 2020. What we've done on an annual basis to date is test the student financial aid dollars. That has been a high-risk program just given the dollar size, given it's across each of the campuses, and then also the need to do the state examination that I talked about earlier. We've also historically called the R&D cluster a high-risk program. We've tested it on an annual basis. But we've seen some really good results there. It's very well controlled. There aren't additional audit requirements that potentially would require an audit of that program on an annual basis. And so our proposal here would be that potentially we move R&D to maybe an every other year testing approach. And you can see just the comparison in this table, what that does for the threshold of expenditures that would be tested. So as I mentioned, we were around 90% tested in 2018 when we did test R&D. If you were to take that out, we'd still be testing over 50% of the total federal expenditures that the university receives on an annual basis. And then we could bring R&D back in, maybe on an every other year basis. So we wanted to present some of this to you, open it up to questions. Happy to answer questions historically, how the R&D audit has gone. But that was what we wanted to come to you with today.
All right, thank you. Committee members, any thoughts on the proposal?
Looks good.
Sounds right. Regent Powell.
Thank you, Chair Cohen. So just really because of over time, the risk, we've determined that the risk around the R&D is relatively low, and so we want to go to every other year.
Chair Cohen, Regent Powell, yes. So given the good historical results from the audits that we've seen, it's been in scope, every year that we've been here auditing from a Deloitte perspective, it doesn't have anything that really is rising to a higher risk, and so we would propose, yes, going to an every other year basis.
Okay, so I have to ask, is there a fee implication because that looks like it's been a lot of grants. It looks like that audit is pretty time consuming. So is there a cost implication?
Sure. Chair Cohen, Regent Powell, that is something that we certainly are going to work with the university on as it relates from a scoping perspective. While the dollars are big, the way that you sample, we get 90% coverage because you cluster like type grants together, and then you sample on a subset of those. So from a sampling perspective, the amount of work that we're doing in R&D is not significantly higher than what we would do in an example from, if I go back to the work that we did, I think the USAID grant, for example. But we certainly are going to be talking to the university about that just to make sure that we're taking that into the account. And I would echo the positive results, which is something we've actually been talking about for a couple of years because this option has been available to us, but we certainly didn't want to jump there quickly. So it was a thoughtful analysis that we went through to say, yeah, this is something that we, even from an audit perspective, are willing to accept just with the positive results that the university has had.
Regent Hsu.
Thank you, Chair Cohen. Just to follow up on that, so how much money would we be saving if we did it every other year? Because if it's insignificant, I would just say, why would we not want to do it? Because, looking 2 years back is always harder when you find something that's been a problem that you didn't know about.
So, Chair Cohen, Regent Hsu, certainly we'll work through the university. My sense is that it would be a portion of the overall fee. I believe that the fee for the grant audit is around $100,000 in total. So it would be some portion of that. But we certainly can come back to you in conjunction with our May presentation and our overall scope to give you, because at that point too, we would have a better sense of what other grants would be in scope for, sort of the overall scope and what that fee might be.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that sounds like a good idea to come back to the committee in May. And Regent Omari.
Thank you, Chair Cohen. I actually don't know where this question belongs, if it's here, if it's in finance, if it's somewhere else. But I'm thinking about the government shutdown. And one, I think it was $10 million cost to the university with the assumption that will be reimbursed as in previous years, but we may not want to make any assumptions as to previous years. So how does that, is that, when we audit, does that show up here? Does it show up in, so I don't know where that question belongs, but I'm curious to know what type of impact or where we would have that discussion.
Do one of you take it? Ms.
Sure.
Paulson?
Yep. I can speak to the status of the shutdown. We were able to draw on all the funds that we weren't able to draw on during the shutdown, and we were able to do that within the first couple of days of all the agencies being back, or the affected agencies being back open.
Thank you.
Regent McMillan.
Yeah, thank you. I just note also that board leadership, Vice Chair Powell and I had an ongoing conversation about the cash management approach, and very satisfied throughout that you applied excellent judgment, and all of our liquidity ratios, everything else was constantly being watched. It's a big number, but we have a lot of research dollars here. So anyhow, just from the committee standpoint, that was something we talked about every couple of weeks with President Kaler and Senior Vice President Burnett.
All right, well, and I will echo that. Thank you very much for your work. We appreciate it very, very much, and I know the committee will look forward to hearing more from you in a few months. And Ms. Paulson, thank you for all of your work, too. All right, on to item number 2. And I was remiss in not welcoming our interim provost, McMaster. We're very glad you're here, and now you're on the stage. And Executive Director Meyer. Do you have any words? No. The two of you get to just introduce yourselves and your comments.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Cohen, members of the committee. I'm Bob McMaster. I'm the acting provost, but my real job is Vice Provost and Dean of Undergraduate Education. Joining me is Executive Director Heidi Meyer, who's in her 3rd year running our admissions office. I want to thank Heidi for coming in here on this snowy day right after foot surgery. I was worried she wasn't going to make it, but she did. So we would like to give you an update on the audit that was done on admissions about 1.5 years ago, with some findings that we needed to address. One of the major initiatives out of this was purchase of a new system, a new application processing system that's really been able to shift the efficiency and the attentiveness to that process. And Heidi today is going to talk about that new system.
All right, good.
Thank you very much, Regent Cohen and members of the committee. I want to talk a little bit more about the audit findings particularly, and Bob mentioned there were some needs to address some of the systems that we had in place. So in thinking about the technology needed in the Office of Admissions and within a recruitment and admissions program, we rely heavily on technology in order to perform really high-touch, targeted population communication with our students. We log communications to all prospective students, whether that be emails, phone calls, letters, incoming communications, and outgoing communications, to make sure that we have a personalized process in place where we're meeting the students and building relationships with students. And we needed to make sure that we also had a similar process for our application systems, that those sync together. So in terms of our actual application review system, we needed a technology that supported over 60,000 plus documents because between freshman and transfer programming each year, we receive around 60,000 applications as well as corresponding documents associated with those things. So you can see we needed a really high volume program. And we were lucky enough to find one to really suit our needs. Slate Technolutions is the name of the system that we brought in place. And we came by Slate because an RFP had already been completed by the graduate school and the Carlson MBA program to onboard Slate. So luckily enough, we were able to bring in what is really the gold standard for application management systems in Slate. So because that process and that contract was already in place, we were able to begin with the fall 19 application cycle using Slate Technolutions. So one thing that we indicate is that phase 1 is in process right now. We're working on, and we've been reviewing fall 19 freshman applications in Slate. Phase 2, as indicated in our slide here, will include further modules to support the transfer application review. And we also have additional implementations that we want to be utilizing in Slate once we have all of our processes onboarded with these current modules. But one such way that that the process has really become streamlined is this is a picture of what our process looked like before and what it looks like now. And I think you can see what was pointed out as an audit concern was the number of the data flow between multiple systems. You can see PeopleSoft, our system of record, FileMaker Pro, which is our system previously of application review. We reviewed all of our applications in FileMaker Pro. And then Perceptive Content is a document management system. So our staff were reviewing applications using Perceptive Content and also ImageNow, or Perceptive Content and FileMaker Pro, and toggling back and forth. And the data was toggling back and forth as well, then moving into PeopleSoft. Slate has really changed that process and simplified that process significantly, as you can see. We have applications and documents in Slate. We do all of our review in Slate, and then that review decision is moved into PeopleSoft. So a much more efficient and effective application and information flow between the two systems. And just beyond the information flow benefits of Slate, we've noticed a really, really strong benefits to having Slate Technolutions, and that is that we have data into Slate faster. Previously, when we had to wait for documents to be scanned into Perceptive Content and for information to go into our FileMaker Pro system, there was a lag time there. Now it is nearly instantaneous for documents to come into the Slate system and for review to be able to occur. So our reviewers are able to review applications much quicker than in the past. In addition, we're using one single system. So as I mentioned before, instead of having to toggle back and forth between multiple documents and between Perceptive Content and FileMaker Pro, reviewing in one single application management tool allows for our staff to have greater efficiency, also less eye strain. And also standard integrations. The common application is very heavily integrated into the Slate product, so we did not need to manufacture or do anything on our own within the Office of Admissions or work with the Office of Information Technology. We were able to use a common integration, which I think was another very helpful point in onboarding Slate so quickly. Additionally, as I mentioned, Slate is used nationwide at some of our peer institutions and at many institutions across the country. So we now have more benefits in terms of best practices and sharing of best practices, and also utilizing other people's skills and our skills as well. Slate user groups really create a lot of the new modules that come on board. So this is a process that's evolving all of the time, and we're able to take part in that. So that is one really strong benefit that we're seeing from Slate, and that we're excited to use Slate in the future. And that's the information I have to share with you about the product in general and the systems in general.
Well, thank you for that. I think that's very helpful to the committee. Now, questions or comments from the committee? Regent McMillan.
Thank you, Chair Cohen. I don't want to take the time now for this, but I do want to highlight as I look at the diagram on the streamlined process for freshman review, where you've got Slate stacked up alongside PeopleSoft. Kudos for finding Slate, for bringing it on board, for addressing what was challenging audit findings and taking them seriously and running them to ground. My question probably has more to do with our Vice President for IT and perhaps our Vice President for HR. As we bring big system upgrades into place, the ESUP and PeopleSoft was a huge part of that. I'm always curious, and perhaps I can get an offline briefing on this, you know, how did those play out, and how many places where we go to apply it was the hoped for or anticipated gains from a big expensive upgrade like that, not recognized, not realized, or where did we need to bring additional tools to bear? This looks to me like one of those where, what we put in place probably helped in all kinds of ways, but it wasn't enough, and now we've supplemented it with Slate. Am I thinking about that the right way? And I don't want to call anybody else up to the table. It's just that's the way it looks to me, and I'm not looking for anybody being wrong. It's just we don't think about all the downstream effects of a big ESUP, and this looks like fallout from ESUP where we could have, maybe we could have done better, I don't know, but it's just the original costs ultimately magnify with, how much more additional software, what do we got to do? Any quick enlightenment there, or is that something I should track down your colleagues after the meeting to learn more about?
Acting Provost McMaster.
Chair Cohen, Regent McMillan, I'm afraid I'm not in a position to opine on that. I would get myself in trouble real fast. I can say that the shift over to PeopleSoft Student actually put us back a step or two, in that we'd customized a lot of our student systems and went to a more generic vanilla. And so we lost some capacity there. But I think it also enabled us to better link Slate to this. We wouldn't have been able to hook Slate to the old PeopleSoft because it was so dated.
Super. Thank you, Chair Cohen. And you just got it I probably sounded like I was worried about cost. Ultimately, those big upgrades are designed to get at customization, which just kills everybody customizes. And I remember when we were bringing that on, this will help people not customize, and now I hear we're customizing. So again, no wrong or right. I'm just thinking about how does a board level person understand what's the fallout from ESUP multiple years ago. This looks like a classic example of where it's probably better today, but I think you just got at the root of the problem. I will follow up independently. Chair Cohen, thank you for the opportunity.
Okay. Regent Hsu.
Thank you, Chair Cohen. Thank you, presenters. Is there a place I can look to that summarizes how the new system addresses the specific findings of the audit report?
Chair Cohen, Regent Hsu, the Slate Technolutions product addresses finding number 2, and while number 2 is not yet fully resolved, because we just put Slate into place in the fall 19, we're working really closely with the auditors to ensure that this will be taken care of within the next reporting period.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just
Sure.
to follow up. So really, it only satisfies number 2?
Chair Cohen, Regent Hsu, the processes and the systems around Slate addresses number 2. The other audit items have been resolved through other processes, and we have one additional item that is still in the works of being resolved.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good. All right, well, thank you very much for all the hard work on this and for some, it sounds like some very helpful changes.
Thank you.
Okay, and now we are on our internal audit update. Chief Auditor Platt.
Thank you, Chair Cohen, members of the committee, student representatives. I would begin by pointing you to the dashboard that's on page 120. That in the dashboard in the middle indicates our progress towards our annual audit plan completion. And I point you to this specifically for the benefit of Regent McMillan, who asks about this almost every time. So this is where you can look to see if we're in the green, we're good. If we're getting in the yellow, I ought to be telling you what we're having trouble with. So at this point, our dashboard looks very good. In this reporting period, we had a 41% implementation rate of outstanding audit recommendations. 4 units actually completed their management action plans and are now falling off that list, which we are always delighted with. We did have 1 unit who has now risen to having an outstanding recommendation outstanding longer than 2 years. We had cleaned that spot up, but now we have one back in that. And that is the School of Dentistry, and the outstanding audit recommendation deals with their faculty practice plan, which I have been at the university for 25 years, and I think there has been an outstanding audit recommendation on the dentistry private practice plan for probably 20 of those 25 years. It's an ongoing challenge, and the school is working and has put together a straw man plan that they're trying to refine and make sure that it's usable and workable and sustainable. So it's not lack of effort, it's just a sticky thing for them to come to resolution on. We issued 11 audit reports in the reporting period. 7 resulted in overall ratings of good, which indicates that they have appropriate controls in place to mitigate their significant risks. We had 2 audits that had varying results. Each involved processes that were related but distinct, or were carried out in different areas of the institution. So one of those was our reporting on outside consulting and our external professional activity reporting. On the one hand, our external professional activity reporting process was determined to work very efficiently and provide appropriate information and appropriate levels of compliance. Our report on outside consulting, less notable results. And that's well known, and there's commitment and efforts being made by the provost office to improve the awareness, the understanding, and the monitoring of that reporting mechanism. So, and then the other regard was in the area of resident determination. The audit results indicated that those determinations at the undergraduate level, where they are centralized, are very efficient, they're very predictable, that they were accurate. We had very few areas to pursue in that regard. On the other hand, in our professional schools and graduate programs, those decisions are made locally in those colleges, and we found a great degree of variation among those, and made recommendations for the leadership to assess whether that variation is in the best interest of the university and what might be done to bring more consistency around those processes. We had 1 audit up at the University of Minnesota Duluth campus that we assessed to have adequate controls in place, but improvements were found to be needed in administrative controls and that address critical operational compliance and information technology areas. And lastly, we did a full audit of the Crookston campus and assessed that there were needed improvements needed. There were a large number of recommendations arising from this audit, but it's really important for the audit committee to appreciate that this was indeed a campus-wide audit that covered a myriad of campus activities. So very broad areas that were reviewed. The campus is faced with some serious challenges, including financial constraints, admission challenges, and infrastructure needs. Leadership there demonstrated a very sincere commitment to making the improvements suggested to the best of their ability. So while there's a lot of findings and the chart is a little colorful, put it in perspective that it was the entire campus. And so many areas had things to be improved on, but again, a large cross spectrum of types of audit issues. We have 10 audits in progress, and as noted on page 129, or actually 130, we continue to participate in a significant number of institutional committees and initiatives, and always strive to be good community citizens.
All right. Chief Auditor Platt, thank you for that report. And now I'll ask if committee members have any questions or comments. Very clear. Okay. Right. Regent McMillan.
Well, if I didn't ask a heat chart related question, our chief auditor would be disappointed.
Of course.
So I don't have a direct heat chart related question, but as I was reviewing these materials and you called this out with the School of Dentistry, it seems odd as I look at that chart that you could end up with a satisfactory overall progress rating on something that's gone on that long. You know, it's like, could it be 20 years and still be satisfactory? And again, I'm more interested in the leadership reaction to that and how our provost, our president, our senior vice president all would work with you to help resolve it, not to, again, make somebody wrong or call somebody out. But it seems like when something goes that long and we're able to call it satisfactory, you know, I just wonder, do we have enough going on to actually drive it to resolution? And maybe you could say a little bit more about how you interact with the provost and others to keep making sure the attention's there to get something resolved when it's outstanding for 20 years.
Well, they did clear it up periodically during those 20 years. It just didn't sustain itself well. In this particular regard, I mean, we don't like anything to go over 2 years. Where that happens most often is when it's a technology issue and you have to implement technology, because that just takes time. You can make great progress, but you know, to implement a large system, it's going to take you more than 2 years. In this particular case, this is just a very difficult challenge for the School of Dentistry to find a practice plan that works for their faculty members. It's a different construct than University of Minnesota Physicians. Part of the School of Dentistry would like to be in University of Minnesota Physicians, but they have concerns about that as well. It requires legal work. It requires working with a wide number of faculty who structure their practice activities in different ways, some internal, some external. It's structuring those plans to provide some degree of funding back to the dean's office, much like the dean's tax out of UMP. So we go and we have conversations with them. We see where they are in the process of developing that skeleton plan, working with their faculty on whether it's workable, and it just takes time. We know that Dr. Toller and the dean of the dentistry school are aware and working on it and committed to doing something. It's to their interest to do it because the practice plan brings them money and provides additional external compensation to their faculty. So it's, they have an interest in getting it done and doing it well. So I'm not sure if that answers the question. I don't think it's a lack of focus or a lack of attention. It's just, it's a difficult exercise to go through and come to resolution.
Regent Powell.
Thank you, Chair. So just a quick question. When did we last audit University of Minnesota Crookston?
Oh, I would say in the last 6 years, because we normally do a campus every year, one of the system campuses. So every 3 years, it would be Crookston, Morris, Rochester, and we always have audit work going on in Duluth.
Okay, so maybe 3 or 4 years ago?
Yeah, I would say.
Okay, that seems okay. I mean, it just seems given the number of findings, would we, and, you know, and they're isolated isn't the right word, but they're a little bit more on their, you know, on their own, and would it be helpful and useful for them to have more frequent audits? Because, you know, there's, as you said, there's work to do here, and just wonder if we'd have been better off if we found out, you know, just found out earlier. Anyway, it's a thought.
Certainly something to consider.
Yeah.
Speak with the chancellors about that.
Yeah.
All right, and you're on again.
I'm on again.
Item number 4.
Easy item, information item. This is bringing audit engagement less than $10,000 or $100,000, which is required by policy to be brought to the audit committee after the fact. And this engagement includes an engagement with Deloitte & Touche to audit the financial statements of KUMD, the radio station up at UMD. And those audits are required by the Public Broadcasting Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and we're delighted that Deloitte does them versus us. So the Controller's Office has reviewed the engagement and determined that it does not in any way impede the independence of Deloitte & Touche.
Okay, thank you. Well, just one more comment before the meeting can be adjourned. I began my career or service as a regent, surprisingly, as chair of the audit committee, and worked with our chief auditor way back then. And for my last couple years on the board, I'm chair of the audit committee. And so one
goes around comes around.
That's right. So one thing I have learned is that this university is very, very fortunate to have Gail Klatt as our chief auditor and her team that does the kind of work that they do for our university. So a round of applause.
By the Board of Regents as well. So.
And now the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Wow. It started and it ended.